Back to the resolution. All right. Resolutions.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. The modified agenda.
We have an addendum to the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the modification of the agenda to add the HR consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, motion good first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. We want to be community and staff comments. Chat. Check.
Okay, Marcy, Steve, board members, I have two requests. The first is, can you please confirm that the 3 books that the 8th grade team has used as their core curriculum have gone through the adoption process by the board and IMC as stated in our board policy for curriculum adoption? The 3 books are Tears of a Tiger, Seed Folks, and Soldier's Heart. If you can please provide a link to the minutes from that meeting. If not, can you please review the course design and get back to me by the end of the school year? My second concern comes with great frustration and sadness. I'm coming to you hoping you will be able to either convince me that what I've been through has been made right already, or to convince you to uphold the standards set by our board policies and remove Eleanor and Park from the middle school library. For those of you who don't know about this situation, let me tell you that I've been asking for the middle school to uphold the standards set by board policy 2020P since February, when my daughter started telling me about some of the books she was reading for Battle of the Books. When I was met with the fact that they didn't care about most of my concerns, this doesn't count to my 3 minutes.
It doesn't. We'll pass.
Okay. When I was met with the fact that they didn't care about most of my concerns apart from Eleanor and Park, I began looking closer at what my daughter was doing in class and was dismayed at that as well. Since then, and with very significant effort by me, David, and Steve, Eleanor and Park was removed from the classroom since it had very much crossed the lines of our board policies. Let me add that the teacher responsible for its existence in the classrooms for at least the past 5 years still does not see how it violates these guidelines. Given the amount of effort it took to remove it from the classroom, the fact that the teacher still doesn't have a clear understanding of the policy regarding supplemental curriculum, and given all of the times my trust has been violated in this process, I still do not believe that if it is left in the library, it will not find its way back into the classroom. I would like to appeal the decision of the IMC committee on the grounds that it was swayed by the chairman of the committee by presenting concern about a larger problem than this one book, when the charge of the committee was to determine the appropriateness of this one book. And then I have a longer, more detailed letter for each of you guys, along with the document that was presented to the IMC committee by Steve. So, that's it.
Thank you, Charity, are you going to email those documents, or do you want to leave them with Bonnie? Okay, okay.
I'll read them.
Thank you, Charity.
Debbie?
The issue brought up by Charity is an important one. What our kids are exposed to and when is very, very important. We want to challenge them while expanding their view of the world. However, I want to make sure we have strong policies that guide this work to protect those boundaries. We as parents want to trust our schools and the content that's deemed appropriate for our kids in our absence. We want to be partners in this work and not made to feel like we are the enemy. Although I can understand that many argue that this is a benefit that comes from this particular book, I also believe that skips over the initial question that should be asked first. Is it appropriate for the age that it's available to? You can look at many factors to evaluate whether to choose a book or not. Our current library policy is modeled off of wording from the American Library Association in guiding what those factors should be. It suggests we use professional views in approving our books. It recognizes we can't expect one person to read each book. 9 out of 11 of the professional organizations that provide views say this book isn't appropriate for students at a middle school age. Reviews given by experts in their field, book editors, professors, and other distinguished librarians. The issue is bigger than one book, however. To give some context, I'd like to briefly share a little bit about the book. The book actually says the F word over 100 or 60 times. A PG-rated movie maybe only says it once. 2 times it bumps it up to an R-rated, which is actually for 17 years and older. I think our kids are exposed to that enough. They don't need it in our library. This is our current society's norms, right? I don't think what Charity is asking is at all unreasonable from what is already accepted as a standard in our society. There are several, and they're not good, sexual comments in this book that would completely inappropriate to share in a setting. I've typed some of them up, and I'm going to leave one with you. I probably will read a couple just so that you get goosebumps. Please know that when I read the content, some will say, oh, it's not that bad when you single it out. I'd suggest that you read the book from front to cover. If you have a middle schooler, read it out loud to them. You won't want to do it. That's a red flag. You can find that many books with valuable lessons that will expand the perspective of our kids. Please stand behind firm policies that enforce books are chosen at the level that's appropriate to their age. I'm personally grateful for Charity and the work that she's done to bring this to light.
Excuse me. Yeah, you got to wrap it up.
I'll wrap it up.
Thank you.
But this is super, super important. Thank you. For one, the book was put on the shelf just by one person. Second, I'm here to say that it's not just one parent. I'm guessing all parents of the middle school read this book. They'd be just as upset. I'd like to ask for your support for the policy and hold the staff accountable for how books are chosen and approved. Mr. Holland, one excerpt talking about Eleanor. Why do you call her Big Red? I think it's because she has red hair and giant tits, Josh said. Thank you.
Debbie? Kathy?
I have a quick question about the monthly budget report. In the annual report, you aggregate the administration, teachers, paraprofessionals. In the monthly report, and maybe Marcy's going to address it. I saw that it was on the agenda. Are administrators for the buildings included then in regular education, and then Chris would be in special ed? And what is support services? Is that the district administration? I couldn't, from reading the report, I could not tell what the expenditures for administration, and that was my question.
Jody? Sorry, Mish.
Hi. Here to talk about wrestling. No, I just got an email today from Denise Thompson about possible new staff and student boundaries. And I don't know if it's going to be discussed or not, but I just wanted to weigh in on a couple of my point of views. The wording in it, if it's used as it is, makes me really uncomfortable. It would make me uncomfortable coaching girls because it singles out girls. You know, it says, male wrestling coaches should not demonstrate holds on female student wrestlers unless they have a meeting that school year and the parents agree to it. And wrestling is a really hands-on sport, but I don't think it should just say male to female. Like, I think it should say, if we are going to do this, coach wrestler. Because I might have a female coach someday, you know, I might have a homosexual wrestler someday, you know, and all those things would be like, you know, I think I'm advocating for all the kids, not just the girls, you know. But, you know, wrestling is really hands-on. If it was worded this way, I don't know, I wouldn't want to coach just girls, you know. And the other thing it says is that you have to have 2 coaches at a girls' practice. It would be really hard because when we split, like boys and girls duels are on different nights, I only have 3 coaches. And so 2 of them would have to stay, and it would just be me going to the event, or the girls just wouldn't have practice, and then I don't know, you know, how they would feel about that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is, in here it says coaches should permit parents to attend practices, and I have a huge problem with that. I've had lots of problems with parents. 2 years ago, we had to close our room. We had a parent, you know, it was in there, he was obnoxious, screaming at his kids, screaming at me, screaming at everybody. So we made it a closed practice. You know, parents can come to practice, you know, but they run it by me and they have a purpose. You know, it's just not just an open door in and out. You know, and I think that this wording is really just geared at wrestling. Whereas, you know, I think like if it says they should permit parents to come to, it says wrestling practice, but then basketball practice as well, track, football, you know, I think these things should be generalized to athletes and coaches, not male coaches to girls. Okay, that just feels like a big red flag to me. It makes me not want to grow the girls program, you know, if I had to do that. So, yeah, but that's all. I just wanted to share that. So if you, I don't know, if it moves forward, if you guys want to discuss it with me or whatever, I'm always available.
Next would be recognitions.
For recognition, we have one, and it's Jalen Garcera, who is our senior student board representative. She isn't here because she's a senior and really busy, and she also is working, so she's not able to be here tonight, but we have this beautiful plaque for her, and we also got to celebrate her last night at the Senior Scholarship and Honor Corps night. So we're so grateful for the work that she's done. She's remarkable in coming prepared to our board meetings and giving input, having her voice, and giving a board report. And of course, Ashley's been an awesome partner, and Ashley's gonna step up as our senior next year, mentoring our new junior. So Ashley, thank you for your ongoing leadership, and we'll celebrate Gia. I'll give this to her at another time.
Any other recognitions? No. We'll then move on to reports. First one's end of year.
Yeah, we have our end of year board report, and our executive team is jointly sharing this. So team, if you want to come forward so we can move through our report efficiently. So it's really fun that at the beginning of the year, we get to share our strategic plan, the updates of our strategic plan, the data around that, and the school improvement plans that are aligned to it. And then we get to come back we embed ongoing reports throughout the year, but we get to come back mid-year and do another comprehensive report and share another big picture overview of an update on all of our ends and strategic goals. And then at the end of the year, we get to come back and do a comprehensive report. Mr. Rabb, do I need to like separate you from the, I don't send you to the principal's office or?
They always get my bald spot. I kind of wanted to give them my better side. The better side.
That's what you get when you've been in middle school for a long time. And
Yeah.
Mr. Rabb, has been a middle school leader, so.
Can't take middle school out of the guy.
So it's really great that we get to do this several times a year, and tonight's one of the nights where we get to come back and look at our big strategic goals. So we're actually going to start with our student ends, right? Are we starting with our student ends, college careers and life update? No, we'll just move right to our strategic goals. But we'll come back and report that to you, board. So we want to share that orange piece up top of what does college, how are all kids ready for college, all kids ready for careers, and all kids ready for life. So we'll loop back on that piece. And for our 3 strategic goals, strategic goal 1 is centered on teaching and learning. Strategic goal 2 is around operations. And strategic goal 3 is around communication and collaboration. So for strategic goal 1, we want to highlight just a couple things, and we're going to share that as an executive team. And we're going to start with just a couple highlights about how we build commitment around our mission of all kids ready for college, careers, and life. One thing that we've been working on this year is deepening the alignment between our district strategic plans, so those ends of college, careers, life, are those 3 goals I just mentioned, and the school improvement plans. Each school aligning their goals specifically to college, careers, and life, even in elementary school, even in middle school. That's not just high school work. So we're really glad that we've been able to tighten that alignment. And then knowing how much we've been using our district, I point back to that big chart at the back, that anchor document, that is really the strategic plan on one page. We connect to that in professional learning, we connect to it in meetings, we connect to it in conversations. And so we encouraged each school to create their own anchor document that's a 1-pager of their school improvement plan. So that's a new element for this year. Thinking forward for next year, our strategic plan expires in 2020. So next year, school year 2019-2020, we're going to be looking at how we can involve lots of different stakeholders as we revisit the strategic work, and we're building that calendar out over the course of the year. So we'll bring recommendations, or continue to work on that. We'll bring those recommendations to the board about who are the voice, how are we going to collect student and staff, community, and family voices as we're looking at that strategic work. Also looking forward to next year, we've gathered input to develop our priority focus areas. We know we're always focusing on big idea on goal 1, goal 2, and goal 3. So next year, we're continuing for goal 1 to work on guaranteed viable curriculum. This year really focused on essential standards, and next year we're continuing that work, but also looking at unit planning within teams. For goal 2, we're focusing on a sustainable budget because we know a lot of shifts have happened in the way that the state is funding schools, and so we're doing deeper work around that. And then for goal 3, still working and focusing on a culture of learning and caring across the system and honing in on internal communications as a focus for next year. So that's a piece of goal 1. Next, Steve's going to talk about how we're developing strategies to implement that vision.
Yeah, and as we talk about strategies to implement the vision, a couple of indicators on that are what are the modifications that we need to make to the district improvement plans. And so the example of that I have that I want to share with you is we've had a district PLC in Orting for some time, which are the PLC leaders from all the different buildings that gather a couple of times a year, and we've been focusing on the PLC process over the last couple of years. And in what Marcy said with our guaranteed viable curriculum and really working on that thrust right there, we're also trying to kind of connect the dots with the resources that we have. So that district PLC focus next year will actually be moving over and taking on this guaranteed viable curriculum piece. And it allows us to be able to differentiate the instructional focus in terms of the guaranteed viable curriculum by school, by department, or by grade level. So those PLC leads will work with their PLCs on a specific aspect of moving that guaranteed viable curriculum forward this next year. And then they'll set their goals, they'll have their targets in terms of the time and resources that they need, work with me on that, and then they'll be able to navigate that throughout their entire building. So we already had a vehicle in place that was doing something different. We made a shift to that so that it would help get us closer to our vision. And then another aspect of the implementation of vision is ensuring consistency. And the example that I want to share with you on that we're pretty proud of is we've been doing math training for some years, individual teacher and grade level math trainings this year. This last year we utilized that training to actually coach teachers how to be in each other's classrooms and support each other in a peer model. So we use that to develop their skills, so it's not just the administrators have that responsibility as administrators to go in and observe teaching and give feedback to teachers, and that's an evaluative growth process. This part of the evaluative growth process is not an evaluation, it's just growth. And teachers working with teachers, and the teachers are very fired up about that because they really like to be in each other's classrooms and work together. So we have been developing the leadership capacity of the teachers, and then so that what that does is that takes that math training that we have and extends that consistency across all of the different classrooms. So we're pretty excited about that.
As we're developing our vision, we're working on how are we holding ourselves accountable for that vision. And one way that we do that as a board superintendent team is through our annual board calendar, so that we are monitoring the ends that you set for our students around college, careers, and life. And we have 3 measures for college, 3 measures for careers, 3 measures for life. And we keep bringing that back to you over the course of the year, calendaring it out, because so often we wait till June and then we do this big summative report, but instead our board has requested that we have checkpoints all throughout the year, and then you're hearing about our course corrections along the way. Working backwards from that board level accountability, we developed a leadership team accountability, so saying what are we bringing to the board and when, and let's back that up and work on those things at our leadership team meetings. So we've calendared the student ends that the board has set for our system and embedded that in our leadership team meetings across the course of the year. We've scheduled checkpoints to review our strategic plan and our school improvement plans, so that we develop them, of course, in the fall. And then even they're always part of my supervisory conversations with principals, and specifically anchored to their mid-year evaluation and end-of-the-year evaluation, where we look at student growth data, achievement gap data, growth of teachers, and the goals that they're setting around that, and then decide if we're going to continue working on those same goals or shift goals. So we're embedding that throughout the course of the year. And then, like Steve talked about with our teachers, how they're going into each other's classrooms, another reciprocal or mutual accountability piece that we've added in this year is our administrators are doing that as of this year. So we're taking our principal team and we're all going into each other's schools once a year, where the whole team goes into every single school, and we're visiting classrooms together, and that's helping us understand our instructional framework better so that we as leaders understand it better. It's helping us calibrate around what quality looks like, and it's allowing us to share good practices that are happening at each school and learn from each other, and then also give each other feedback. We're doing that when school is in session, and then we're also doing that on Friday afternoons. So we're doing these learning walks during PLCs. So we visit each school during one PLC time, and the principals sharing their how they're supporting that collaboration that happens on Fridays. And then we're going around together as a team and visiting the professional learning communities and coming back and debriefing and giving each other feedback on that, learning from each other. So that's been a powerful learning opportunity that's job embedded this year. Next, we're going to look at how we're aligning our district procedures and policies.
Yeah, so when we think about that, there's a couple of things that really were high on our radar this year. One was the change in the behavior laws that were coming out. So this 18-19 was the first phase, and then 19-20 is the second phase. Significant changes around behavior laws. And so this last year, we spent time and actually had the opportunity to really pull the assistant principals. A lot of times we focus everything, like the guaranteed and viable curriculum work that I was doing, I pretty much focused on the principals, and then they had the responsibility then to bring their assistant principals, their teachers in. But in this case, our assistant principals really are the ones that do the lion's share of the discipline management in the building, so we pulled them together. We all kind of understood what these laws were, and then made the adjustments that we needed to in our own behavior expectations, and we'll make those reflect in all of our behavior matrices for next year. That was a big piece of work, and we're still working on it, and we'll have those all aligned and ready to go when school opens in the fall. And then the other piece tied to the curriculum audit, or tied to the guaranteed viable curriculum is, and this kind of came out of the work with the principals, was what's our current reality? And we've been, as people have been asking questions about, what curriculum, where, and what's being taught and all that, we spent some time, we put out a survey, the buildings did all of this to do an audit of what is currently being used, compare that to what's adopted, so that we can get back to a place, if we need to, in whatever place, to do that realignment process, as well as identify any curriculum that is outdated so that we can put that plan in place to do the updates that would be necessary to keep with our vision.
Speak of those updates be made next year?
No, so it all depends. We already have targeted, we're going to be looking at middle school science. We know we're looking at middle school science next year. That's a specific focus. If the social studies standards get finally released, that'll be something we jump right on. But at this point, we haven't, part of that district PLC group, that guaranteed viable group, will be to take this data and then look at their own school and then analyze that and then start setting some priorities within that. So that's a process that's coming.
So we'll hear more about that?
Yeah.
In the summer,
Be next fall.
in the fall?
Yeah.
This might be jumping the gun for where your conversations are going to go for next year, but once the various grades have had a chance to look at, the document, here's, our curriculum maps and all that, what's the mechanism for reporting that and then being able to access it for the future so that we know we don't go into, I'm thinking specifically in elementary where there's such, that's spread out across multiple, we have lots of classes in one grade, multiple campuses. How is a teacher coming in going to access the thing and say, okay, this is what we decided last year, and so that everybody, if we have a roadmap, everyone knows to follow it.
The vision for that is utilizing our Google platform that we have, and that you would literally have a Google Doc by grade level, by content area, that would be a curriculum map for the year, that would include linkable pieces of it, so that, for example, it might say for this particular unit and the common formative assessment, and it would have CFA, and it would be a blue link, and you click on that, and it would actually take you to the common formative assessment. So if you have an assessment that you're using, or if you're using a particular study guide or any of those kinds of things, those would be embedded in that Google Doc. So it's a part of that long work for the guaranteed viable curriculum, the mapping of that, and then the central housing of that, so that any teacher can access that. The goal that we have in light of that, when we talk about guaranteed and viable, we're talking about guaranteed for every kid. That doesn't matter what teacher you have and what grade and what content area. There's things that we're guaranteeing that all kids are going to get regardless of the teacher they have. And when that document is built, what that also not only serves the kid, but it also serves all of our teachers, especially the teachers that are coming into our system. because we want to spend the time identifying the what, so that when they get here, they don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. They can spend their time focusing on the how. But that would be, the vision for that would be is those documents would be Google Docs that teachers would have access to, they'd be embedded in. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah, and I anticipate there's probably some kind of a document control mechanism where those don't just get modified on the fly, but go through.
Well, that's a good question. One of the things that we have said is that we want it to be a living document, because the reality of that process is the best laid plans of mice and men, you put this out in play, and then the viability part of the guaranteed part is, we said this is what we were gonna do, and this is when we were gonna do it, and within this timeline, and then as they have a chance to go through that process, and any teacher will tell you, I'm making revisions all the time, we want to be able to make sure that we have the access to make the revisions to the central document, not dilute it.
Sure.
But that as teachers have gone through that, and teachers are really in charge of this process through supervision of their building principals, but as they go in and they say, okay, we said we were going to go from here to here, and this was the process that we did, we found that when we walked over there that it made sense to put this over here, this, and maybe this a little bit shorter, and that document would be able to be revised based on that experience. That's the viability part of it, is it reasonable? Yeah.
Thank you.
And then finally, how we're using the vision and how we're using that as an indicator of progress.
Yeah, there's an old statement around data that a lot of systems are data rich and information poor, and there's a lot of data that's available out there. And
The
one of
acronym is DRIP.
Huh?
The acronym is DRIP, Data Rich.
That's what I need is another acronym. Thank you for that. And then so we have two main sources of the data that we actually three. So we use Skyward for kind of the student data around attendance. We use the portal, the Washington State SBA portal for the state test data. And then we have Homeroom, which uploads, is supposed to be the central warehouse for all of that, where principals can pull together based on groups of kids, classes, whatever. They can get snapshots of whatever it is they're looking at. As we've used Homeroom over the last couple of years, or maybe even better yet, not used it as well, one of the things that we really started looking at this year was the idea that I proposed to administrators was, the bottom line is we need to create something that you guys will use as a data aware, and if it's not Homeroom, what might it be? And so we started looking at this company, Forecast 5, and this was something that Marcy and Cliff, through their Redefining Ready work, identified this group that is really, actually has a data infrastructure that's based on the indicators for college, careers, and life. Seemed like a perfect fit. And so the principals had an opportunity to have a presentation on that. We looked into that, we did a side-by-side comparison, and one of the things that we decided to do here recently was to transition over to the Forecast 5 framework and give that a try and see if, again, that helps us increase principal use and access to the data. It has great flexibility to it that teachers can use, even to the point where they can actually put their inquiry, their PLC inquiry goals in at the beginning of the year, and the process when it's built will actually track their progress towards it based on the input of their common formative assessments and stuff. It has great potential to actually make us not just data rich, but information rich, and that's really our target for that. So we're pretty excited about that, because we report on college, career, and life readiness. And so now we've got a tool that we're going to be using that actually targets some of those things better than Homeroom did.
And then that would be a wholesale replacement of Homeroom, would
Yes.
be the anticipation.
Yes, that's right. It'll be completely different. Principals are going to have to learn how to use it. I've got a crew that's working with me. We've got a webinar coming up on the implementation of it coming up this next week, and then we'll bring everybody on board when principals come back in August and get moving on it.
That's a good program that they did.
Yeah.
So we're about to shift to goal 2, and I like how you're just asking questions along the way, but any other questions on goal 1? Teaching, learning, and establishing a vision, okay. So goal 2 is around effective operations. And we're gonna start with how we're using a continuous improvement process for district operations, and Steve's gonna kick us off.
Yeah, one of the things that Marcy went to a workshop last summer during her summer vacation and learned what was called the science of improvement science model, and brought it back and shared it with the central office team. And it's a framework for trying to take an idea, solve a problem, set a goal, but then actually put it into play in a way that actually has coherence, makes sense, has a logical process. And so I've actually used that in 2 areas so far this year. I used it with the TILT team that I had in terms of developing the plan we had for TIPT next year. See, more acronyms. And then I also used it with the principals when we were doing our guaranteed viable work. And what I realized with that was it really helped bring clarity so that people understood the pieces and the parts and how they all fit together. So that was a great learning that we had, that Marcy brought back to us, that we've been using to try to keep us focused on continuous improvement. And now that we've got a couple of those pieces in place, there's another process in that in each of these areas now, we look at the plan that we have, we do some work around it, we look at the data, we analyze and come back and make the revisions to it. So it's a very good infrastructure that this is the first year that we're starting to use it. And like I said, my personal experience with it has been very positive. And then the other part that I just would want to highlight is that we do have our long-range plans in the areas of technology, facilities, safety, security, capital facilities, human resources, transportation, all those different things. Not that we just have those plans, but those plans are viewed and revised every year. So I shared with you when we were at OHS that our strategic plan for technology, that what's going to happen next year, which is year 2 of that plan, is going to be different than what was actually stated in the plan. And so as we went through year 1 of the plan, we collected the data in terms of the staff involvement in it and the engagement of staff in phase 1, and we went, okay, we need to increase that. We want to improve on that. So that's where we came up with that committee, and we came up with the idea of the studio classrooms. So that's a great example of a 3-year plan that we put in place, where it becomes a living plan that, if need be, is modified based on the data that we're collecting. And so and we're doing that with all things. I know Debbie would speak to the HR plan that she's built last year and has been making the revisions to it, along with the other ones. And so that's how we analyze and modify any of our plans that we have in place, ongoing work.
Thank you. Debbie's gonna share our fiscal resource management.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Is it still, oh, it is on. I sounded quiet for once. Wow. So yes, I do want to talk to you a little bit about managing fiscal resources. So we know we're here for kids, and being here for kids in everything that we do requires that we're good stewards of the money and that we develop a budget that is efficient and that also is looking for continuous improvement. And so one of our core items that we do, of course, is align the budget to the strategic plan. And you've heard a little bit about that again tonight. That does come up regularly in all of our meetings because it is a living document here in Orion. We also last year, at the beginning of this year, developed in our finance department and submitted a 4-year budget, and that went to OSPI. And that was part of the new legislation and something new for us to do. And one of the things that you likely recall that last year, we started in finance having monthly reports out to the buildings. Another piece that we do when you talk about strengthening the district's fiscal health is really paying attention to all of it. And so Marcy Bannon, our business services administrator, she's working with not only our departments but our school buildings. And as you can imagine, when people are responsible for a budget, it's a big job and a big responsibility. And she's meeting with them, some of them weekly because some pieces are more complicated, and some of them monthly. And so that we are always looking not only to keep them on track and help them as they work through the year, but also they have great ideas too, and we can look at efficiencies that way. There are pieces in here about new sources of funding, and I know we'll continue to work on that. Would you like me to-
Yeah, next we're gonna talk about developing, managing key elements of district operations. And a few highlights, there's lots to share, but a few highlights from this year was managing construction, the construction of the new 8-plex portable that's going in at PTR. You might have seen it now present as you drive by, so we're getting close to having that up and running. And then also the remodel of the culinary arts room at the high school, which we had the opportunity to walk through when we did a board meeting over there. We also meet with land developers ongoing, and we update those build-out projections. We've been working on using that to inform our facility planning, and looking forward, as we're preparing for summer, we have our facility maintenance plan, of course, that we keep updated, and we have prioritized projects going there. But we also just completed the walkthrough of all of our facilities. So our facility supervisor, John Christian, walked through with all the building leaders and assessed the buildings, took requests, and then now working on a prioritized list for summer projects.
Marcy, would it be okay if I also speak to section C?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think
skipped
it
your
rolled the
human
page,
resources.
it rolled the page, and HR is pretty excited about what HR is doing.
Yes,
So
would
I'd
you
like to
please
share that
do
as well. So with regard to C, it talks about strategically managing human resources. And as you know, a large portion of our budget is human resources, the people that are here that are closest to the kids, that are helping them learn. And so this is really about, and you heard recently when I shared with you on our team's human resources plan that we put together in support of the district, and how it's all about recruiting and selection and retention. And that's what this one is about. And it talks about continuous improvement, and you know that was something that we talked about when I shared information with you on that. So I just wanted to talk about a couple things. Last year, it says in policy that we need to have a hepatitis B program. This is to keep our employees safe from bloodborne pathogens. I'm familiar with it, and it's something we hadn't yet implemented. We became aware of that. We found the funding within the budget for that, and we were able to implement that program this year. So we invited nearly 60 employees whose jobs had been identified as potentially at risk if something came about, and we invited them in to come to a program that is at the district expense per policy. So we felt good about that and moving forward in that direction to have that program in place. We also developed the emergency sub-training last year, but we held a couple of additional trainings this year, and I had great partners in that, including Steve Rabb with the Teaching and Learning Department and some of our principals or assistant principals, where we brought in quite a few new emergency subs, and we increased that pool, and we actually, I don't know if the direct correlation, but in one way or another, we are hiring subs, and we have increased the, or I should say decreased the rate at which we had unfilled positions. So we're doing better there. And the last thing that I wanted to highlight is that this year, and you heard this in the Human Resources update, we also held what I think is our first ever, or first recently ever, training for our administrators on good recruitment, best practices, and training in that area, so that we can all get on the same page and make sure that we're moving forward together. Just wanted to let you know those pieces.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And connected to that, we're going to hear about how we assure that employee performance meets district expectations.
Yeah, so this is, again, a little bit tied to how we use data and how we use data to inform our practice. And so what we do is we take all the evaluations that the principals do on the teachers, and Marcy reads those, I read those, and Debbie reads those. We do some analysis around it. We try to find the areas that we want to focus on. Again, trying to really build some consistency in that. I tend to use this guaranteed and viable thing and just almost every area that I touch, and so when we're talking to principals about this, I use it in the sense that it's guaranteed and viable evaluation and growth process for teachers. So teachers shouldn't have to get the lottery on who they have as an evaluator any more than kids should have to get the lottery on who they have as a teacher. And so the consistency that we develop amongst ourselves is really critical. So we take that data and then we really sit down and talk about the areas that we think, okay, we're seeing some real strengths in this area. And we're, Marcy talked about those administrator walkthroughs. Those were a result of looking at the data and saying, okay, we need to spend a little bit more time re-anchoring principles in the 5D+, which is the evaluation rubric. And then while we were doing that, we also wanted them to have some practice and get some consistency around. They have kind of 4 key areas that, well, they script the lesson and they code the lesson, and then their feedback is what they notice, what they wonder about, the analysis of the lesson that they see, and then the feedback that they give the teacher. And so we went through each one of those pieces as a part of those walkthroughs that we did to kind of ensure that the process that we use is getting more and more consistent. I just left before I came to the board meeting, we had a TPEP committee meeting, which is a group of teachers that Debbie and I meet with.
And TPEP is our teacher and principal evaluation.
Yeah, thank you. I figured everybody knows acronyms, right? We have to fly with the acronyms, yeah. And we just started, we focused quite a bit of time today on student learning goals. And really we're calibrating what the teachers understand about those, what we as a district understand about those, and then calibrate that with principals so that, again, it's all a part of this process. So I would say, in my experience, coming to Orting, it's much more consistent and focused on than my previous experience. I mean, this has been a really growth area even for me. I've got lots of experience and years in teacher evaluation, and it really wasn't until I came to Orting that I realized what it could really be. And, based on Marcy's leadership and what she has kind of put in place, and as I'm learning it and working with it, I think it's a huge asset to our district that I would suggest to you a lot of other districts don't even come close. So
that wraps up goal 2 around effective operations. Other questions around that before we move to goal 3, communication and collaboration? So looking at communication and collaboration, we want to share with you about ways that we're collaborating with families and community, and Tara's going to lead that. Oh, thanks. Good stuff already. Good evening. Good evening. Okay, so we have had a great year. So a couple of the things that we've done is we actually used the improvement science that Marcy brought back from her summer workshop last year around the communication piece. And we've gone out to staff and solicited input through some surveys to help. The first step of improvement science is to understand the problem. And so that has helped us to understand where areas that we can make improvement. And so we're taking that data and working together to create real action items, real tangible things that we can do as we focus on internal communication, continue to focus on internal communication in 1920. We have also increased visibility at community events and organizations. We attended the community planning meetings. Some of you also attended some of those with us, which was great. It was really a great learning experience for me as well to sort of get the big picture of what's going on in Orting. And we attended the Daffodil Festival. And through our Culture of Caring work, we've been able to meet with numerous community organizations to talk about the Orting School District mission of all students ready for college, careers, and life, and our culture of learning and caring. Finally, one more thing I'd like to highlight around that communication piece is that we've been able to implement texting notifications to our families so that that's just another way that we can communicate with them. So now they're receiving a phone call, an email, and if they have opted in, they are also receiving a text message. And it was an opt-in, and we had 927 opt-ins for text messaging.
Is that just equal or equal?
I'm sorry?
Did you have a goal in mind? Was that?
I would have liked it to be a little bit higher. That was about 25% of all of our contacts, but the FCC rules say people have to opt in. But we'll keep reminding families, so, yeah. Okay, Tara's gonna share about how we're involving families and community in the education process. Okay. Yes, so many events here in Orting for families to attend. We recently had kindergarten registration, kindergarten roundup. It was totally adorable to see all those little kindergartners come in. We had Future Falcon Night where incoming 6th graders and their families could attend. They went to Orting Middle School to learn about the middle school, and they had all the clubs and activities that middle schoolers could participate in right there, ready for kids to sign up to really encourage student engagement at OMS. Of course, at the high school, they hosted a FAFSA night and a college and career night. Read Across Orting at OPS for our little learners and their families, and the all-new Cultural Unity Night that the entire community and families that were invited to. So there's been lots of events at our schools in the evenings that families can attend. And we also nominated the Orting Food Bank for the Community Award with WAZA. And Dr. Shepherd presented that award to them at a workshop about a month ago, I believe, and that was really great because they've done a lot for us, and so that, partnership that we've had with them, we were able to recognize them in that way. And then I'm actually going to have Chris Willis come up and just briefly talk about a couple of parent training opportunities and an ELL parent engagement night that he had.
Thank you. Real quickly, one of the things that I'm really excited about is the fact that parent training is really an essential part of any educational program in a school district. And this year, we actually had 3 different trainings this year. Positive parenting program that was done through Multicare. And then we also had positive discipline for 6 families, for our preschool families. We also did one on guardianship for our families who have special needs students, and then we had an ELL gathering regarding graduation and post-school opportunities. And so overall, we had 16 families participate in those activities. And going back to the roundup this year, we had 101 families come to our kindergarten roundup this year, which is a pretty exceptional number of families coming. So, thanks.
And Chris, if you want to stay, part of goal 3 is communication collaboration, and sometimes conflict arises, and we want to talk about that too. So Chris is going to share how we work to resolve conflicts.
One of the things that you know already is that we have a 24-hour rule here at Orting, and if there's a conflict that occurs within the building, we have 24 hours, even in the buildings. You have to get back to families within 24 hours, which is a good thing to do. Number one, it's a consistent rule throughout the whole district. It's part of our culture to get back to people in an expedited manner. So that's number one. And then when I first came here 3 years ago, we didn't have any interpreting services. We have 2 interpreting services right now through the school district. Sorry, I'm trying to find mine today. Language Line is one and Dynamic Language is another. And the second year that I was here, we created interpreting services, and we have a procedural handbook for each of our buildings. And then the second thing is that our conflict resolution process is also translated into Spanish. This year, with the help of Tara, we also have language access services. We wanted to create an Orting message rather than just having a blanket message regarding, like you see in the hospitals. You just have a blanket message. If you speak, ask that if you did. So this year, we actually gave an Orting message for each of for the 14 languages that are in our district currently. So because we're a changing community, this pamphlet will probably get much longer, but right now it's 14 languages. Just so that you know, one of the things that's really interesting is the cost per word. It's 22 cents a word. And so when you do this over and over again in different languages, think about it. So anyway, so one of the things that we have to do is to make sure that we're doing it in a timely manner, but we're also being efficient as well with making sure we're interpreting and communicating with all of our families and all of our learners within our boarding community.
Before we move to the next piece, one thing I want to piggyback on what Chris said. As we're focusing on internal communication next year, well, we're always working on it, but we're elevating that as a focus next year. One of our goals is to really live out that 24-hour response to families, because we want that to happen. We aim for that to happen, and that's an area where we can grow. We need to get consistently better at that. So you'll see that come up next year too. So Chris is going to talk about how we partner with community organizations through communication and collaboration.
Yeah, and so one of the things that, I've said this before, and so I feel like a broken record, but we can't do it alone. We can't educate our students alone. So we develop these relationships. We develop these relationships not only with community agencies, but we also work with local school districts. So one of the things that you vote on each year is our interlocal agreements. And so this year we have an interlocal agreement with Puyallup School District to provide vision services and also to provide audiological services. We also will be working next year with Sumner School District for our physical therapy. Because we're so small that we only have bits and pieces of people. And so we can't have a whole of everybody. So we're working with that. And then we also have a brand new one for vision services as well with the Olympic ESD. The other thing too that I'm really proud of is actually the Right at School program this year. We have 42 students who are participating in the before and after school program, which I'm really excited about as well. It's interesting, most of the students, I think I've told you this before, most of the students attend the morning program versus the afternoon program, which is directly opposite many of the communities surrounding us. It's because everybody leaves early. And so to get out of town, and people come back to boarding before school ends. And so I'm really proud of that. And then they'll also be doing this summer, we have over 20 students already registered for summer camps this summer. And so that's really, from my perspective, that's really a service we're providing families, and it's a before and after school program and extended learning opportunity, which is actually a learning opportunity for our students. The other piece that I just want to briefly talk about is our mental health services, and currently we have agreements with MultiCare and Comprehensive Life Resources, and we're currently meeting the needs of 32 students in that area. Now here's something I'm really proud of, the most of all. We have a relationship with the Mount Rainier Football Club. I have to say it. I told you this too. I have to say it. And by the way, we do have a Special Olympics finally. We have a Special Olympics soccer team. And they came in second place in state.
Kathy is beaming because her daughter
Yes.
was awesome.
Yes. So,
And your
just so that you know, it's a big deal. And I'm telling you what, the reason why it's a big deal is number one, it gives an opportunity for our students with intellectual disabilities an opportunity to participate in our community. Number two, we've gotten parents together who are beginning to actually support each other in a variety of different ways. They never had an opportunity to do that before. And to have a team come in second place in state, I mean, geez, how awesome is that? So
They're giving you a run for your money, Mr. Clement.
So, and then one thing too, you heard about the measles outbreak and thinking about collaboration. And so we ended up collaborating with Safeway to provide measles shots to a little over 20 of our employees. And having that relationship with them was, it just kind of honestly had nothing to do with me. It just kind of fell out of the sky into my lap. And that piece there really made a big difference regarding to being proactive in a situation that could have been honestly devastating in our school community. And so I appreciate all that we've done with Safeway as well. So,
I had the opportunity to write Safeway and Costco thank you cards for their support during our vaccinations, and I also need to write Chris Willis thank you cards because he really brought them here. But
Tara had a lot to do with it too, and we all kind of worked together.
We did.
Well, finally we did one more Mom and Me mobile medical unit. We did we worked together, and that took actually more work than I thought it was gonna take. But anyway, is getting our sports physicals done here, right on campus, in the little medical unit, and we had 34 students get their sports physicals completed right here on campus, and we're gonna continue doing that. And really, that's an equity issue from my perspective, and it's an equity issue because it gives access to this so that families don't have to leave the valley.
Updating those build-out schedules, because kind of like our continuous improvement plans, they have a build-out schedule and it's always in flux and adjusting. Looking forward, we've begun drafting a preliminary bond development timeline. We know that next year we need to engage and develop, looking forward at what that next bond package might be, what a timeline might be, and what a thoughtful and inclusive process might be to facilitate that. So we're developing that timeline now, and we'll be implementing that in the fall. Once that timeline is developed, we'll bring it to the board as a recommendation and work on that collaboratively and put it in place.
And that bond for facilities, right, that's what, when we get to that point, I would also be interested to get some context around that, as I know we've talked about like 10, 15, and 20-year looks down. It would be nice to be able to see, okay, here's what we're talking about on a timeline for a bond, but here's where that fits in across the broader scope of the really long-term plan.
Okay, good, thank you. So that wraps up communication, collaboration. Any other questions or comments on that? Oh, we did our comprehensive update in an hour. Oh, we're so close.
And I was like taking this as we were going on. I just, we hear about these activities throughout the year, things that are doing coming along, but it's nice to get them all wrapped up and to recognize the volume of work that's been put into that. So, awesome job. Yeah, very, very valuable work. So good job to you and to the team.
All right, any other questions? Next, we'll move on to the financial report. Brad, aye.
I don't have a specific question in there myself. I just wanted to, I don't know if it's appropriate right at the moment. I know Kathy had a question specifically related to the monthly budget report. Is that something that we can digest and get an email follow-up with?
Yeah,
Make sure
Debbie,
that-
can you respond to that?
I'm gonna try, in partnership with Marcy, to be totally transparent. I'm gonna try to answer Kathy's question, and I know that Marcy's already committed to me that she'll also meet with her after the meeting to make sure we have the questions clear in our minds so that we can follow up. So I know it is a prepared by report, if you'll allow me just to share one item with you. Marcy Bannon and I were re-reviewing the report ahead of tonight's meeting, and I just want to draw your attention to just one simple little scriber's error, just so that it's clear. If you look at pages 2 and 3, at the very top, it says in April, we're 2/3 of the way done with the year, so 66.67% of the year completed. And when you go over to page 7, we just neglected to update that percentage of 58.33, which represents 7 months of our 12, and it should actually say that also be aligned with the 66.7. So I just wanted to let you know that part. I also will try to answer the questions. So support services is district-wide. So it's support for personnel, which is our labor, our staff, and other costs. And it would be board and superintendent, business, HR, custodial, maintenance and grounds, etc. So I think it's kind of, the departments are district-wide. Administrators of schools would be included in the appropriate program that they're coded to. And like principals, they would be in the instructional piece, whereas principals would be in the special education portion of the report. So I tried to write some notes as Kathy was asking her questions, but we can do our best job as we get real clear on those after the meeting, if that meets your need. I also, did you have a follow-up to that? Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't do not want to cut off the board. We're here for you. So as you know, the law also changed for levy collection. So we had a law in place in Washington State where levy collection had a levy rate of $1.50 per thousand. And that was in place and through the 2019 year. The legislature recently brought back new legislation where they changed the amount levied from $1.50 per thousand to $2.50 per thousand as the lid. And when voters authorize the amount, they authorize an amount, not a rate. And our amount that was authorized is 3.9 million. So what I wanted to share with you tonight is that even though you've heard in the news likely or seen documents that have been coming through the school district that it changed from $1.50 to $2.50, that in Orting, because we had that limit on the amount of $3.9 million, we still would not hit that $2.50. It's more like, and I'm going to say $2.35-ish, and we're going to have to, when it's assessed valuation, and that's a number that we have to get clear on when we're collecting that amount. But I also wanted to assure you that at this point, unless we have, I should say on the districts, on the staff side, we're not planning to bring a recommendation to you for any piggyback levies. Some of our districts are in Washington have the ability to go out and get that additional money, and that is not something that we are looking at to bring that up to the $2.50. That concludes what I had to say, unless there's any questions.
No, good.
Any questions for us?
Thank you.
Now we're gonna move on to E, first read of the policy. So basically, it's a first read.
I have two things. I believe, is it Jody who was commenting on it? And I feel like some of the things he mentioned were actually already addressed, because this is not the first time we've looked at this, right? This is actually, it's on the first read, but we kicked it because we wanted to communicate. I think some of the things that we actually have addressed here in the markup are ones that he was specifically speaking to. And that's in, I apologize for not giving you the document, 5253F1, and on the second page. So some of the things regarding the gender language were already ones that we had changed.
At our last meeting, I want to thank Jody for his comments. Director Thibodeau and the other directors also had the exact same question, which rolled this back to first reading because our team went out and did some homework. So we'll share what we learned, and then as a team, we can decide if we want to roll it to first reading again, if we need any additional input.
Yeah, one of the things that we ran into when we started looking at this was that if you changed part of it that was talking about the girls piece and you made everything gender neutral, then when you got down to item 4, it would basically say male wrestling coaches couldn't have hand-to-hand contact with even male wrestlers. And I don't think that would work. Because, I was a high school wrestler. And the reason we even checked with WASDA to say, okay, what is this? And this is really kind of pushed through risk management because of some of the circumstances that happen in this, and this is how they get put into language. So what we have, and it should be loaded on your board docs for you, is, and this was just a most recent rendition that Debbie and I were talking about, and then I also had a conversation with Denise Thompson a little bit earlier because she had some input, and Jody mentioned that he'd had a conversation with her as well. And what we're proposing in terms of the change is in front of you where we take out the emphasis on girls, so it would just say coaching sports instead of coaching girls sports, and then the other place where that fits is, and it does say if possible, it doesn't mandate that you have to have 2 coaches, if possible, assign 2 coaches or a second adult at practices. So we would eliminate that gender-specific piece there. And then in terms of the wrestling piece, Jody spoke to this, and then it was part of my conversation with Denise. Well, what if we have a female wrestling coach coaching male wrestling? Well, didn't think about that, because that's definitely a way to look at that. So we feel like that the way to handle that is to take out the reference to male wrestling coaches and the female aspect of that, and have that rewritten to say wrestling coaches should not demonstrate holds on opposite gender student wrestlers unless there has been a meeting and so on. I didn't catch the coaches permit parents to attend the wrestling practice. That's not something that I even paid attention to. I think Jody makes a very good point about that in terms of maybe we should look at the language of that to make sure that the coach has the jurisdiction in terms of that practices can be open, but it also, we don't want to box ourselves in where you have a situation where anybody other than the wrestlers can come in and disrupt the practice. We've got to make sure that our coaches have the ability to legislate that, I would say. So that isn't reflected in this because I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it. But the other pieces I think adjust. Director Thibodeau, you were the one that kind of brought forward the concern initially.
Right, and I like the changes you've made. After hearing Jody talk, I am curious about why it specifically calls out wrestling, because I think of football holds and some other things, some other sports. Even, both my boys played baseball, and there's, coaches trying to adjust position and everything, which I feel they need to be able to do. It just seems weird to call out wrestling specifically when there may be other sports that this might apply to, and maybe there's a way to be more inclusive. So if I could ask that question, you could look into it. And then I like your thought process on maybe coaches' choice on whether parents are, if it's appropriate for them to be in wrestling or in practices. Because if they're being disruptive, it's not a great learning experience for the students.
Nope.
So sometimes parents are wonderful to have around and helpful and encouraging. I don't know if I want a rule that doesn't allow the coaches to make that correct decision.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we'll bring
This
it
is
up again,
Yeah.
once the corrections are made.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's what continuous improvement is all about. We'll keep trying. So that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They should address some of his questions he had, so we can take care of it.
And we'll get Coach Jody's input and other input as well.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and I apologize, I intended to send something out about this a couple days ago. So that it's okay if there needs to be further follow-up, but I'm looking at the documents that are the 3240, which were the formally student conduct expectations documents being retired completely by Worcester recommendation in favor of the 3241s. I wondered, I was hoping to maybe understand, because it's a pretty significant change between the two. And while the existing policy, the proposed to retire, is somewhat long and wordy, and the new one is definitely more concise. I had two senses coming from that. The first one was it definitely is a flip from an expectation of behavior to almost a here's what the school district's not allowed to do. And I don't know that that's a bad thing, but I'm not sure if we have other places where it's very clearly outlined where expectation of student behavior would actually be defined. And
Legislation so significantly changed
and that's, and
recently, so.
yeah,
I wonder
Brett was talking about that. I would be curious to know how much of the verbiage in the new proposed policy is actually kind of being pushed down upon us and therefore is the result of that change.
Yeah,
Um,
but But I also like your point about, so what do we have about our internal expectations with, for example, the behavior matrices and how are they aligned across the system? Because behavior is something that we're hearing feedback on and we know that we want to improve on, and we're specifically needing to focus on. I wonder if that might be a topic for a board work session in the fall. So we're going to be implementing the new behavior laws. We can understand them. You can understand them, so when behavior appeals, come up to the board level.
Yeah, I think I'd like to understand that.
Looking at the discipline matrices across schools, because, a lot of Chris Willis shared about resolving concerns, and so many of them really are around discipline, so there's such big changes we might.
I think this policy was pushed out more from Olympia.
Right, and that was the sense I got, but I would like to, I mean, I know we hear, the laws change, and then as a result, everybody's scrambling to update the policy. I'd like to see the connection in those gaps there, so that we can at least know how much of that is purely reactionary versus things that we can control what that feels like in our own district.
And how that plays with our student handbooks and our discipline
Well, yeah,
matrices.
and that really is,
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
because I think the former policy, there's probably a lot of that, if not verbatim lifted into the student handbook, but there's a lot of overlap there, because I think the student handbook was probably informed quite a bit by the former policy, whereas that's not gonna be quite as, true anymore, so yeah, if we could plan to maybe get a little better understanding on that, so we know. And then the other thing that I noticed is that and I could be reading it wrong, but it feels like the new policy leaves a lot more room for subjectivity over. So one of the things that made the first policy super wordy was it was very repetitive because it was very specific. It was saying, here's this, here's how we define it, here's kind of what's going to happen. Here's this, here's how we define it, here's what's going to happen. And a lot of that was lifted. And on one hand, I think, well, it's nice to have a 4-page policy versus a 22-page policy, whatever it was. But I also wonder, I guess more for just discussion as we move forward, how much of, if we open ourselves up to a lot of subjectivity, and then I would ask the question, is that subjectivity built into what Olympia's telling us we have to do as well too?
And that means we have to provide our own internal clarity, because we still need clear expectations and consistency across schools. So it just shifts where that comes from. What we can't have is, if I can be Steve Rabb for a moment, guaranteed viable discipline. Right, he likes to guarantee viable everything. So, and it can't be the luck of the job, what school you're at or what teacher you have, but how are we providing that in discipline? And we know that's some heavy lifting we need to do. So we'll leverage the new law and policy to help us continue that work.
And I think board work session would be helpful for the next round of changes that are coming down, so we've got a good foundation.
And then can I ask just then on the procedure of that, do we need to implement the new policy during the second reading, like in the next phase around, because of the law having a clock on us? Or do we have time to, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, do we have a deadline to understand these things, or do we have a buffer of time where we can get educated now?
Yeah, the new law goes into, well, we have to do it by next school year. So I guess.
And my concern is all that stuff you front loaded, that you can kind of get them in place before we use what you play. But if that's already been done, then to report on.
Thank you.
That was all I had.
Any other questions?
No, those are good questions, Tyson, thank you.
Good catch. Next, we're going to move in the consent agenda, item 1, 2, 3. Need a motion on this action item?
I'll move to approve items 1 through 3, 1 through 3 on the consent agenda.
Need a second?
Second.
First and second, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Pass. Thank you.
to continue our work on our hazard mitigation plan. And we're so grateful for all of our community partners, and Executive Director Willis, I think, will come and introduce the next steps of this hazard mitigation plan. But we have with us our partners from Pierce County Emergency Management. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, I actually didn't know what a mitigation plan was until 2 weeks ago. But I actually learned a tremendous amount from Debbie Bailey. I'd like to introduce Debbie Bailey to you. She's from the Pierce County Department of Emergency Management, and she is the Mitigation GIS Coordinator. And Bailey is here as well to introduce it and what action the board needs to take today so we can proceed with the work.
And I'm gonna start with some reading material.
Appreciate it.
So that's just a little bit of material you can look at afterwards. We've got our, so this is a FEMA requirement to be able to have a pre-authorization from all of you, the governing body, to go ahead with the update of this mitigation plan. This is actually the second update that the mitigation plan has gone through since it was developed back in 2006 and approved for the first time in 2008. And that is one of FEMA's requirements. The plan gets updated every 5 years, and this plan is current through 2020. I submitted a grant back in 2017 to be able to go through the update for the mitigation plan, and we were, that's a competitive grant that's gone out once a year from FEMA, so you're competing against all 50 states. And I was awarded that grant, and we received the funding for this to be able to go through and update it in December of 2018. So we're going to take this whole year to go through and update the plan, different sections we're doing each month. And my intent is to be able to have the plan ready to be submitted to the state at the end of the year, the first part of January. We have a lot of requirements that we have to meet with this. And the state has 30 days to be able to review the plan, and if we meet all those requirements, then it moves forward to FEMA. FEMA has 45 days to be able to review it also, and then we're granted a pre-authorization of approval for that, and then at that point, we'll be back before you to be able to formally adopt the plan and resolution. The Orting School District is one now of 80 partners that we have in Pierce County that have mitigation plans. You are one of the original ones that started at the beginning when we had 48 mitigation plans back in 2008. And since then, we've gotten different grants and added phase 1 and a phase 2 and a hospital medical group. And now we've actually, with this update, are adding 3 more plans of it. So the brochures that you have kind of divides it up. What we've typically always done before, we've got cities and towns, fire districts, school districts, special purpose districts, our medical group. I think I'm forgetting somebody off the top of my head right now. Anyway, and what we've typically done in the past is everybody's just met in their disciplines and gone through the update of the plan. But I've seen hazards don't share discipline groups. There's a commonality in a geographical area that they share together. And I've watched over in the Cape Harbor Key Peninsula area, they know they're going to be isolated when that Narrows Bridge, something were to happen. And just because of the geographicalness of that and the hazards, they meet together in a MAP group, things go sideways, their fire districts, their city and town, their school district, their utility, they just all come together. And I've watched this over the past 10, 14 years, and I'm like, we need to do this in other parts of the county too. So this mitigation plan with the update to me was like the perfect opportunity to be able to do that. So the second other sheet that you have is I have broken all of our mitigation plan folder jurisdictions down into geographical groups so that we can go through this mitigation plan update regionally where there's a commonality shared in the hazards, and it will allow for that relationship building and to develop those relationships, potential mitigation strategies together, which is just gonna make the area much more resilient. So that's how we're kind of going through this mitigation plan, this time. And we're going out to the community, so in your area, it's, we understand it's a long way for folks to come all the way down into Tacoma, so we kind of picked a general area and we're meeting up in Buckley makes it easier for the folks coming down from Wilkinson and Carbonado and, Orion to just kind of go together, so that is where your group is, and it's kind of how we're going through the mitigation plan. Some of the different hazards that I'm gonna be looking at, I do the GIS analysis pieces on that. So some of those that we're gonna be looking at is the WUI, Wild Urban Interface Fire. So real potential, there hasn't been in the past a GIS shape file that I can use to really designate it, but it does not say that that hazard doesn't exist. So we're gonna be bringing in some components and really dealing with our fire chiefs and being able to really look at that. Climate change and climate change from the perspective of how is that gonna act as a domino effect to already existing hazards? How is that gonna affect drought and potential wild urban interface fire that then the secondary is flooding and landslides that happen as a secondary result of that? So those are some of the other things that we're gonna add into the plan. And then you're gonna get the opportunity to look at the existing mitigation strategies that you've already developed and to be able to update those. And kind of the bottom line of why you want to go through updating this plan is when we do have a federally declared disaster, it opens up a pot of money, which is, comes through what we call HMGP grant money, hazard mitigation post money, and that is your opportunity then to be able to apply for projects to the state. And when they're in the state of Washington, you're only competing for that project within the state of Washington for those projects. FEMA will fund 75% of the project, and that 25% is split. Most of the time, the state will split that extra 25% with the jurisdiction. So it's a pretty awesome way to get a project funded, costing a jurisdiction 12.5%. So we've had a lot, and I know the City of Orion has applied for a lot, and you guys are really aware of that. So the funding is a real reality, and it is really helping the resiliency within the communities. So that's kind of it in a quick, fast nutshell of what the mitigation plan is about and how it's going to benefit all of you. And we really hope that it does get integrated into other plans and that you look at the hazards and come up with the mitigation strategies to be able to help your school district become more resilient. So,
Well, thank you so much for your support as we build this plan. Really appreciate that. So grateful for your expertise, and thank you for coming out here tonight. So board, what you're approving is that we can move forward in engaging in this process that she talked about in building the plan.
And I do see in the memo, there's not a financial part of this other than just time of the resources that we need to provide it.
Yeah, I believe it's because of your grant. Is that right? Yeah, thank you
Yes.
for that.
yeah, so I applied for $155,000 to be able to update the grant. And with that, we received $116,000, and what we need to use is a $38,000 in-kind match. And so how that is applied is everybody's time that is used in the jurisdiction, the folks who are updating the plan, we use their time to be able to offset that difference in that. And so that's how we can develop the plans, and it doesn't cost anybody any money. It's
Thank
only
you so much.
it's only positive projects to be able to apply for the state. So it's a win-win all the way around. So I will leave, this is the plan that we're gonna be updating, so I
It's a
can.
very thick plan.
Right back.
And board members have that, so.
Then I'll be back next year.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
All right, I will
All in favor? All right, opposed, passed, thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to the student rep. Should have a lot for us.
It's your
Graduation
last
ceremony.
one of the year.
Yes.
Is this thing on? Hello? Yes.
So last night, ooh, that's loud. Last night was the senior night award, and seniors got honored last night. So congratulations to them. Today, seniors got their yearbook, and tomorrow we'll get ours. And I'm super excited. Like, I saw like a senior, like one of my friends had theirs. I was like, "Can I see it?" And they're like, "No, you have to wait." I was like, "That's weird." Okay. But what I saw on the front cover, it was really nice. I was like, okay. Tomorrow also is our end of year assembly, so if anyone wants to come, you can. Also tomorrow is our field day, which there will be a lot of fun games, snacks, and a movie. And next Wednesday is graduation. And speaking of graduation, since Gia's in here, she made me do like a message thing for you guys, and like I recorded it, so
Oh,
like
great.
if it doesn't sound good, then like I'll say it.
That's so like Gia to plan ahead. Be prepared.
Hi, school board. I'm really sorry I'm not able to make it tonight, but I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for everything you've done for me. You guys have helped teach me to have confidence within myself and my voice, and the amount of work you all put in trying to make the school as amazing as it can possibly be is admirable. And I'm so incredibly thankful I was able to have this experience and learn from all of you wonderful leaders. From hilarious car rides with Bonnie and Dr. Shepard, to listening to Tyson play guitar at graduation, to calming down cranky Uber drivers before our conferences. I'm happy and proud I got to be able to represent Ording High School students and the Ording School District. Thank you all again, and I hope you all know that throughout my next phases of life, I'll be succeeding throughout my college, my career, and my life because of all the hard work you guys have put into this district. Love, Gia.
Oh, Gia.
Yeah, that's Gia's message.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, thank you. All righty, board comments.
Wow, we should have flipped board comments and student representative report, because that was like the grand finale. I'll give a couple reminders. If you have a graduate or if you need, seating at graduation for your family, let Bonnie know. Also, we talked last time about our board advance and locations for that, and it's wedding season, and there's not a lot in town. So, what do you all think about meeting in the professional learning room? I think we can make it pretty fancy. Well, by fancy, it's really not that fancy, but it's a good, meeting location. We'll have everything we need at the central office.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Also, is Mr. Willis? Do you want to say a couple words? This is board comments, but you can speak on mine as my part of the superintendent board team about Skills Inc. Tomorrow, our students, our graduates, go to a place called Skills Inc. for many of them, and I have the opportunity to be the keynote speaker tomorrow at that graduation that has 40 students in it. So do you want to just explain what Skills Inc. is?
Yes, Skills Inc. is a nonprofit organization that subcontracts with Boeing to create parts, mainly for the 737. Originally, I worked with them 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they were just making parts for planes on ground. Now they're actually making parts to build the actual 737s, mainly the internal components of those 737s. The mission of Skills Inc. is that 60% of the employees that work there have disabilities. And then back about 2001, they began an internship program. Now they call it AIP, Aerospace Internship Program. And they've been working with local school districts around the region, mainly in King County. actually, I think we're the only Pierce County, no, there's 2 Pierce County school districts now, that actually send interns there. Last year, we had four of our students attend. This year, I believe we have 3 attend, and then they also, of those, I'm sorry, 5 last year, of those 5, 4 got jobs upon graduation. And a lot of those students end up working there for a short period of time, and then they end up working as a machinist actually at Boeing. One of the things that they also do, just really quickly, is that they also give everyone a mentor. And that's an important component of it. Every single person who works there, not works there, but as part of the internship program, has a mentor who works side by side with them. And then what they end up doing is having them try each of the areas in the aerospace manufacturing and finishing, and then they zero in on the areas of interest for that student. We currently have 1 student who graduated last year that now is a mentor. He actually is a student who, honestly, he was a 5th-year senior last year, and now he's one of the leaders in the organization. And so I'm very proud of the fact that he has just progressed up the chain very, very quickly. And so Marcy's going to be there tomorrow to do some of the keynote, and it's a luncheon, it's over at Emerald Downs, and so anyway, it's been quite a relationship, and I've enjoyed working with them for a long time, and this is our second year of working with this organization.
Yeah, Chris brought that partnership to our district, and it's such a service to our kids. So Chris, thank you for your heart in connecting kids and the community.
Any other questions? Comments?
I just have one thing, mostly for Bonnie to know before I forget. I will be out of town during the July 18th meeting, so fair warning.
Any other comments? No? I will move on. We will have an executive session for, how long? 30 minutes. We'll come out of the executive session, will not